What is up, guys? In this video we're going to be installing the timing belt on a Subaru EJ20 motor, and the very first thing you're going to do, assuming you've already got all the parts off, are going to be installing the bolt into the crankshaft pulley or the harmonic balancer. And the reason we're doing this is because we need to make sure that our engine has been properly timed, or that all the gears are in sync with each other before we install the new timing belt. So basically what we're going to do here is just make sure that we've got all the sprockets lined up with their marks on the engine block. So you're going to note how the two cam sprockets on the right and left of my head are both pointing directly upwards, and they're lined up with little plastic tabs. And then as for the central cam sprocket, there is a little divot in the oil pump right above it, and so I'm just checking right now to make sure that that's lined up properly. And so once you've made sure that all these are aligned, the next thing you're going to do is begin installing the idler pulleys and the tensioner. And this particular series of Subaru motors uses a hydraulic tensioner, so it's going to bolt in as you're going to see in the video. And then after we do that, we're going to start installing the other idler pulleys. We're going to leave one of the idler pulleys off, specifically the one to the bottom left, the one with a little flange on it. And this is because it's very difficult to get the timing belt over all the sprockets if you are just using the if you're just using your fingers. So being very careful and just threading everything in by hand right now to make sure that you've got enough play and enough slack is going to make your life significantly easier when you're putting the timing belt onto the actual motor. When you are installing the idler pulley that's directly next to the timing belt, this is the one that has a little teeth on it. This one you will only thread in with a few threads. You want to have as much play as you can, otherwise it will be a lot harder to get the timing belt on by hand. The other thing is, when you're installing your timing belt, you're going to note how there's these marks on it. There should be 3 marks total, and so you're going to want to make sure that you can see the left, middle, and right mark, and they should be somewhat close together. And basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be using the middle mark on the center of the harmonic balancer, or the thing that's lined up now with your oil pump, and then the left mark will line up with the timing mark for the left cam sprocket, and then the right timing mark will line up with the sprocket on the right cam sprocket. So that's how you know that your belt on top has been tensioned appropriately, because otherwise you could be off by a tooth or two. So it's very important that you basically slip it on by hand at this point. And then the other thing that's super important and helpful that I didn't get the first time was using paper clips to basically keep the top part of the belt on the sprockets. Otherwise it will keep popping off every time you try to get the belt around the water pump and the little pulley. And I think you'll see it in this video what happens, where if you don't use paper clips, you're going to find that the belt just keeps slipping off. So you can watch me fail right now. There. And so yeah, this I made this mistake many times until I finally realized paper clips, and I know I'm not the first to recommend this. So using paper clips, as I'm about to do, will make your life a lot easier.
Now we've got
Yep. So so these are the paper clips that
paper clips.
hopefully you can hold with both hands. And the trick with this now is, when you slip on the timing belt on the top part, or the top half, and you've got, you know, the 3 timing marks around the sprockets, now you will put the paper clips around or on the cam sprockets. And you know, obviously do not use vice grips, because vice grips will damage your timing belt, which you really don't want to do, because otherwise you just waste an $80 timing belt. So just cheap little paper clips that are not that strong but are enough to kind of just keep the belt on the top half of the motor while you're getting the bottom half of the belt on, is going to make your life a lot easier. So basically just take the little paper clips, and then once your belt has been properly tensioned on the top part of it, just clip them on to the top like I'm doing in the video. And then you'll be thanking yourself a lot later when it comes time to actually now, you know, move the belt around the water pump, and then around the water pump idler sprocket, And also make note, if you're still having a really hard time here, make sure that you've barely threaded on the timing belt sprocket. So again, this is the reason why you only like screw the bolt in a couple threads that is holding in the timing belt idler sprocket. And you can see it, like, it's still hard, like the belt is under a lot of tension. So basically just taking your time, being patient, gently working your way around and trying to take up as much slack as you can to get that belt over the water pump and the sprocket idler, just like we're doing in the video, is great. And then once you get I was really happy, once you get that all done, then the final thing we're going to be doing now is you can finish torquing down or threading in the sprocket, the idler sprocket, and I was looking for the 14 mil socket at this point. All these are 14 mil bolts, by the way. So basically you just thread that in all the rest of the way by hand, and now you'll take the final idler pulley that has a little flange on it, and you can thread that one in order to finish installing all of the pulleys with the belt now around all the sprockets and pulleys. And so basically also just making sure that the bolt is like seated as fully inboard and flush with the engine, so we do have the most amount. And so this is the final idler that we're going to be putting on. It's got that little lip on it. So the other idler that was smooth did not have the lip on it. So I'm also using some Antiseize on these bolts, just because I know Subarus can be notorious for having bolts stripped. So putting Antiseize on will help you not have to torque them as hard on or off. So if these bolts are fragile or they're gonna break, you're gonna make your life a lot easier if you put a little bit of Antiseize on them, just so that you don't have to worry as much about losing all that stuff. But yeah, so, and then this is how the engine should look like after you've kind of got everything on hand tight. After you've got all the bolts threaded on by hand and they've threaded down nicely, now we're going to set a torque wrench to 29 foot-pounds, and we are now going to torque all of the idler pulley bolts as well as the tensioner bolt down to 29 foot-pounds. And once you've done this, you've now successfully installed the timing belt on this Subaru. So you've got everything right to spec, and after you do that, the next thing is going to be actually rotating the engine a few rotations. And you're doing this because you want to make sure that the timing marks on the timing belt that you originally had set to the cam sprockets as well as the crank sprocket or the harmonic balancer are still lined up after you've rotated the engine. And you're doing this to make sure that you're not skipping a tooth or anything like that, because if you do skip a tooth, then your engine won't start and it'll run very poorly. So very, very important to do this step right, unless you want to go back in and spend many hours getting to this step process again. So do it right the first time. Make sure everything's torqued to spec. Don't over torque it, because that's how we strip bolts, and you really don't want to strip a bolt in the engine block, because that is a whole day's worth of work. And then also you're going to remove the paper clips that you originally installed. The other thing that is important to check at this point is the little timing belt guard there, right above the central sprocket on the engine. In this video, I didn't show installing it because I just left it on. So you don't need to remove it, and if you don't take it off, you don't need to make sure to put it back on.
That's a great sign.
The other thing here that's really cool is that you don't need that special guide, because I didn't have the guide. So yeah, and then the last thing we're doing is just make sure that all those timing marks are aligned, and then I am rotating the engine 2 full rotations. Also in the video, you're going to note that I'm torquing it really hard, and this is not necessary. It should not be this hard to turn over an engine. The issue that I was having was that because I had it, the way I had this engine mounted to the engine stand, the pressure plate on the back was actually rubbing against one of the bolts that was holding the engine onto the engine stand. That's the reason why there's so much friction here. But if your engine is this hard to turn by itself when it's not connected to anything, you do have a problem. But basically, yeah, I'm just rotating this. I was scratching up a lot the pressure plate, but you know, that's a separate issue. The engine was fine. And yeah, if you made it this far, congratulations, you've installed a new time belt. And I hope this video helps. Thank you all for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and take care.